I'm 38 years old, and I was engaged to Addison, who is 40. We had been together for 3 years before getting engaged about 6 months ago. Everything seemed fine at first, but as we began planning the wedding, things started to go downhill. The main issue began when we started discussing the guest list. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and naturally, I wanted her to be part of the special day. However, Addison made it clear that she didn't want any children at the wedding, which felt odd considering she had 2 kids from a previous marriage and 6 nieces and nephews who she is very close to. I couldn't understand why she would have such a strong stance against having kids at the wedding, especially when many of our invited guests were parents. We had several arguments about this, but eventually, I agreed to her demand that no children be invited to the wedding. However, I insisted that if she was going to exclude my daughter, she needed to do the same with her own children and her nieces and nephews. My daughter isn't a small child. She's 14, so I didn't think it was unreasonable for her to attend. But Addison remained firm in her position that there would be no kids at the wedding, not even my daughter. She insisted that it was for the sake of having a stress-free, adult-only celebration. At that point, I reluctantly agreed to her wishes, mainly because the wedding was going to be a small, intimate event held in my parents' backyard. There would only be a few guests, so I convinced myself that my daughter wouldn't be missing out on much. Everything seemed to be settling down, and I thought I could accept the situation. But just a few days before the wedding, I received an accidental email from Addison's younger sister, Kate. It was a message containing pictures of Kate's 2 daughters dressed in wedding attire, asking for my approval. At first, I was confused because the email was sent to our joint email account, which we had set up specifically for wedding-related communication. When I saw it, I immediately realized that Addison had been hiding something from me. She had been telling everyone else that the wedding would be child-free, yet she was planning to have her own kids and her nieces and nephews attend. The email was meant for Addison, but Kate had sent it to the wrong address, and by the time I tried to check the email again, Addison had already deleted it. Thankfully, I had taken a screenshot of the message before it was removed. I didn't confront Addison immediately, but I was furious. When I got home from work, I pretended everything was normal, but something about Addison's behavior seemed off. She acted strangely, likely anticipating that I had seen the email, but I didn't give anything away. I wanted to wait for the right moment to address it. 2 days before the wedding, I decided to talk to my daughter about how she felt regarding Addison. I had spoken to her before about the relationship, but given everything that had been going on, I felt it was important to check in again. I'm glad I did, because my daughter revealed something I hadn't expected. She told me that before our engagement, Addison had always been very kind and welcoming to her. But after we got engaged, Addison started acting very differently toward her. My daughter said that whenever I wasn't around, Addison would ignore her, but when I was home, she would turn on the charm and act friendly. This hurt me deeply. My daughter had kept quiet about it because she didn't want to spoil my happiness, but it was clear that Addison's behavior had changed, and my daughter was picking up on it. When she found out about Addison's child-free wedding plan, she assumed it meant Addison didn't want her in her life anymore. She didn't even fight for her place at the wedding, knowing Addison didn't want her there. My daughter didn't express her feelings about Addison to me before, but after hearing all of this, I realized how much emotional distance had grown between us over the past few months. I felt terrible for letting Addison influence me into excluding my daughter from such an important event, especially since it was clear Addison had no real interest in making my daughter feel welcome. This was when I decided to cancel the wedding. I couldn't go through with it after everything I had learned. I told Addison the day before the wedding that I wasn't going to show up. I didn't go back home that night, opting instead to spend the day with my daughter. I knew I had to make it right with her and show her that she mattered to me. I didn't respond to any of Addison's calls and informed my parents of the situation. They would be the ones to explain things if Addison reached out to them. I didn't want to speak to Addison until I was ready to address everything. The next day, I showed up at the wedding venue about an hour before the ceremony was set to begin. As expected, Addison's family had already arrived, and much to my surprise, All of Addison's children and nieces and nephews were there too, even though she had told everyone it would be a child-free event. I could hear the kids running around, all of them under 12 years old. When Addison saw me, she rushed to greet me, trying to explain that despite her previous instructions, her family couldn't leave their kids behind, and they insisted on bringing her own children. She gave me a string of excuses, but I didn't let her finish. I simply pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of the email that Kate had accidentally sent to our joint email account. Addison's face fell, and she knew immediately that I knew everything. She started apologizing, but it was too late. I told her that I had spent the previous day with my daughter and had learned how Addison had been treating her for months. I didn't want an explanation anymore. I told Addison it was over, and I was not going through with the wedding because it was clear that she didn't value my daughter. It was a painful decision, but I couldn't move forward with someone who had so little regard for my child. Without waiting for her to say anything, I turned and walked out, leaving her calling after me. I didn't look back. I went to my car and drove straight to a hotel, where I spent the night. The next morning, I woke up to an overwhelming amount of messages from both family and friends. Everyone was confused and upset, especially Addison's family, who were furious with me. I didn't feel the need to explain myself to them. I told my family and friends the situation briefly and spent the rest of the day with my daughter, trying to rebuild the connection that had started to weaken between us. 5 days have passed, and Addison's family is still texting me nonstop, demanding explanations. Addison has defended her actions, saying that she couldn't outright ask me to exclude my daughter, but that she had her reasons. She's asking to talk in person, but I'm not sure I want to hear what she has to say. I've been cheated on before, and I know that dishonesty starts with small lies that can escalate. For me, any form of dishonesty is a deal breaker, and Addison's behavior, combined with her dishonesty, made it clear that we weren't meant to be. I have no regrets about calling off the wedding, even if it was at the very last minute. It might have been sudden, but it was the only way I could ensure I didn't get further involved with someone who didn't value me or my daughter. The decision to not invite my daughter to our wedding has been weighing heavily on me, and I've been struggling with feelings of guilt and confusion about whether I made the right call. There were never any issues between my daughter and Addison, my fiancée, at least not to my knowledge. They used to get along very well, and everything seemed fine between them. But suddenly, over the past few days, I've been reflecting a lot on my actions and decisions, and now I feel like I should have been more upfront with Addison about my daughter from the start. I'm not sure why it took me this long to realize, but I feel as though I should have addressed things honestly, instead of letting them escalate into this mess. I think it would have been better to confront Addison directly, especially when I first found out about her decision not to invite my daughter to the wedding, instead of letting it fester and pretending everything was okay until the last minute. Looking back, I feel a bit like a fool for not addressing the issue earlier. If I had spoken to Addison then, much of the drama and hurt feelings could have been avoided. I should have been more honest and transparent, but instead, I avoided the confrontation, and now I'm paying the price. It's been bothering me for days, and I've started feeling like a jerk because I didn't do the right thing from the beginning. I've now made the decision to end things with Addison. I've asked her to move out of the house since it was once mine, and now that we're no longer together, I think it's only fair for her to find another place to live. I've given her until the end of the month to vacate, and in the meantime, I'm staying with a friend. I've been in a hotel, but that situation wasn't sustainable long-term, so I'm now relying on a friend's hospitality. In some ways, I feel better about my decision. A lot of my friends have reassured me that I did the right thing by choosing my daughter over Addison. They've helped me realize that at the end of the day, my daughter is my priority, and I shouldn't apologize for that. If anyone has a problem with my decision, then they can stay out of my life. Addison's reasons for not wanting my daughter at the wedding don't matter much to me anymore. I told her that if she couldn't explain herself clearly in text, then I didn't want to hear it at all. I've gone even further and blocked her parents and sisters, who I now know were in on her plan and didn't say anything to me. It's disappointing because I had built a good relationship with them, and I thought we were a family, but now I feel betrayed. Addison's behavior towards my daughter has been hurtful and confusing. When I spoke to my daughter about the situation, she was just as baffled as I was. She had no idea why Addison had started acting cold and distant toward her. Initially, my daughter had tried to maintain a good relationship with Addison, but Addison didn't seem interested in repairing things. Instead, she continued to push my daughter away, and it only got worse as time went on. I had a long conversation with my daughter, and she reassured me that she wasn't bothered by me moving on and getting married. She's always been okay with it, and she never had a problem with me having a new partner. Addison's decision to shut her out made no sense, especially considering how much effort my daughter had put into trying to make things work. My daughter isn't the kind of kid who would lie about something like this. She knows how important honesty is to me, and I trust her completely. So, I have no doubt that Addison is the one who caused the rift, not my daughter. The fact that Addison hasn't responded to my text in hours only reinforces my belief that she's avoiding the situation. It's not like her to ignore me, especially since her job requires her to be on her phone constantly. So, I know she's seen my message. She's usually quick to reply, but this time, she's chosen not to. That tells me everything I need to know. I'm done with her. I just want her to leave my house and my life, so I can get back to some sense of normalcy. After receiving Addison's message explaining her reasons for not wanting my daughter at the wedding, I was even more convinced that the whole issue stemmed from a single misunderstanding. At the engagement party, my daughter wasn't feeling well, so I told her she could stay in her room if she wanted. However, she insisted on coming downstairs briefly, even though she still felt sick. After a few minutes, she went back upstairs, and Addison overheard her laughing and talking to a friend on the phone. Addison took this as a sign that my daughter was faking being sick to steal attention from the party. She then told her sisters about it, and they made it into a bigger issue than it really was. This small misunderstanding snowballed into a belief that my daughter was trying to create drama and that she wasn't happy about me getting married. I've spoken to my daughter about this incident, and she confirmed that she was, in fact, still feeling sick but wanted to go to the party anyway. She wasn't faking it, and she certainly wasn't trying to ruin anyone's fun. Addison, however, chose to blow it out of proportion and then withdrew from my daughter entirely. Instead of talking things through with me or my daughter, she let her insecurities take over, and it led to the mess we have now. Addison's reasons for not wanting my daughter at the wedding seem completely invalid to me. It's clear that she was insecure from the beginning, and that one incident at the engagement party just gave her an excuse to pull away from my daughter. When I think about it, I realize that there were other signs that Addison wasn't happy with my relationship with my daughter. She would complain about me not spending enough time with her, especially when my daughter was around. I never made an issue out of it because I thought it was a good thing that Addison was dedicated to being a good mother to her own kids. But now, looking back, I see that she was subtly demanding my attention in ways that I didn't notice. I'm honestly glad that I ended the relationship when I did. If Addison had remained in my life, I believe she would have caused even more problems between me and my daughter. When she finally apologized, it was too little, too late. She admitted that she had let her insecurities and immaturity get the best of her, but by then, I had already made my decision. I told her that nothing was more important than my daughter, and that I had to let go of our relationship. I knew that I wasn't going to be happy with Addison if she kept undermining my relationship with my daughter. When I went to collect my things from the house, Addison was home. She tried to apologize and beg me for another chance, but it was clear to me that the damage was done. I couldn't ignore the fact that she had chosen her insecurities over the well-being of my daughter and our relationship. I told her I understood her feelings, but for me, my daughter came first, and I wasn't willing to go back on that decision. I told her to find a new place to live, then left without looking back. I feel bad for being so cold towards her, especially since I know she was upset. But in the end, I had to do what was best for my daughter, and I have no regrets. I'm currently staying with a friend, and though I'm going through a rough time, My relationship with my daughter has never been stronger. We've started talking again, and she's been telling me everything about her life without holding back. It feels like we're back to how things were before all this drama started. We're even planning a trip to the beach together, and I've invited a few of my friends with kids around her age to join us. It'll be good for all of us to take a break and enjoy some fun together.